But I have a genuine fantasy-related question. But here's the thing, George, you're not going to be around for much longer, and this is a tough question that I wanted to ask. This is more directed at Brandon. No. Wait, I was wondering, like, how would you feel about someone else taking over and finishing the books? Yeah.
Not me.
Don't do that. That's wild. I feel like this is one of those situations where the internet shows up in real life. Ugh, that's not the way to go about that. Look, I know everybody's frustrated and wants to see Winds of Winter come out and wants to finish reading A Song of Ice and Fire. I know I do, but but saying things like that to the man in person is just crazy disrespectful. If you are totally unfamiliar with this situation, this just happened at WorldCon 2025. There was a panel with George R.R. Martin and a bunch of other great fantasy authors, and somebody goes up and asks a question, but as part of their question, they say, "Hey, George, I know you won't be around much longer, but basically, who would you like to have continue this, if you want anybody to continue it?" And it's just, oh man, don't do that. But what's crazy to me is that even on the internet, even all the people complaining about A Song of Ice and Fire not being finished, myself included, most people are upset because they're fans of the series and they want to see it finished. They like George R. R. Martin and they love his work. Now, I'm sure there's a vocal minority of people who maybe genuinely dislike the guy because he didn't finish the books. In my opinion, George R. R. Martin is a living legend of fantasy right now. I mean, he's one of the greats. And I say all this as somebody who has made a bunch of jokes and who has made even like sketch comedy videos, kind of poking fun at the idea that George R. R. Martin will literally do anything except write these books. But that comes from a place of just trying to be funny over just a dumb thing that's definitely a meme in the fantasy community. And it's not meant to be disrespectful. Like, I would never try to attack the man's age. Like, that's a crazy thing to do. What makes this all worse to me is that I feel like this is almost George's event. Like, WorldCon is a celebration of all speculative fiction and to have the Hugo Awards. But, like, George R. R. Martin is one of the biggest headliners there. He always goes to them. Back in 2018, I saw him at the WorldCon in San Jose, because that's right next to me. And I saw him on a few panels, and he was telling stories about the lifelong friends he's made at WorldCon. Like, he's been going for years. And I remember he was trying to promote Night Flyers, the sci-fi show on Netflix based on his stories, his books. And during that discussion, they introduced the producer for the show, and I totally forget his name. But he had worked on movies and other TV shows, and he came in, and everybody was like, "Oh, okay, cool, whatever." And then George R. R. Martin comes in, and the crowd went crazy. Everybody's like cheering and clapping, and it was like a roar of the crowd when he was there, because at WorldCon, I mean, this is his people. These are fantasy fans. The producer even got a little offended and was like, "Hey guys, I make movies too. I'm not saying I'm a big deal, but I've done some things." And everybody's like, yeah, that's nice. George R. R. Martin's here. That's, what? As a fan of fantasy, like, he is an icon. He is a legend. And I remember walking out of that, and he had actually walked out right behind me. And for a moment, I turned, we locked eyes, and I was like, oh shit, George R. R. Martin's right behind me. I should ask for a picture or like, quick, ask him a question or something. But then I see there's a crowd of people not too far behind him. And I was like, if I stop, he's going to get, just overwhelmed by the crowd. And I was like, I'm not going to say anything. Whatever. It was cool enough seeing him. That's fine. And it's like, I know those places, people go kind of crazy. So in what is probably the place that George is celebrated the most, you have somebody come out there with a crazy disrespectful comment. It just makes everything a little bit worse. I mean, it looked like the other fantasy authors on the panel kind of at least try to, talk to him and console him after. It was just a weird situation all around. But the other strange thing was they said, this question, and I want to, switch over to you, Brandon Sanderson. Like, meaning, it sounded like they were going to ask, oh, Brandon Sanderson, are you going to finish George R. R. Martin's books? But the panel was George R. R. Martin, Robin Hobb, I believe, Rebecca Rowanhorse, Ryan Cahill, and Brandon Sanderson. Out of all those fantasy authors, And I love Brandon Sanderson's work. I think he's also a great fantasy author and a legend. But what makes this all even more strange is that Brandon Sanderson is a terrible pick to finish A Song of Ice and Fire. Like, he would say it himself. Like, their style and tone and just the way they write is just so different, and he would be a bad choice. And I say this as a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson. Half my content is Stormlight Archive stuff, but he is not even the best choice on that stage. Out of the authors on that stage, he's probably the least like George R.R. Martin. So what just a wild take on another level. That's just, like, what? So all this to just say, real life is not the internet. If you see your favorite fantasy author out in the wild, you probably shouldn't say crazy things to them. They don't know you. You're just a stranger, you know? These people, I'm sure, have thoughts and feelings, and maybe don't do that. But I think watching the response to this, I think most people would agree, like, this is not what you do, okay? Let me know what you thought of this whole thing in the comments below, and if you want to see other stuff, some fantasy memes that are not meant to be disrespectful, but just silly, dumb, kind of funny, hopefully funny, then subscribe and check out my other content. And until next time, later.